supported births in birth centers in Seattle, and I had just loved what birth centers can offer. It's a nice in-between experience of what a hospital can be and what a home can be. It's a home-like environment that seeks to allow people the same liberties that they would in a home setting without having to be in their home.
Today we are speaking with Myla Flores, a DONA certified birth doula. Maya has witnessed a rainbow of experiences in supporting women of various cultures, circumstances, and birth outcomes. Maya is also a Lamaze certified childbirth educator and a certified lactation counselor through Healthy Children's Center. We talk more about her passion project of opening up a birthing center in the Bronx. Myla, welcome to the show.
Hi, Annette. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I like to start off with just a little background information, a couple of quick questions. What career did you want to do when you were in grade school, high school, and college?
Wow. Yeah, I actually always was a caring individual, and I wanted to be a nurse. My name, as I understood from a really early one of those, my name.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
I learned that my name meant compassionate mother or nurse, and I knew I would one day be a mother. But in terms of a nurse, I was like, yes, that seems right. And so I kind of lived my life really compassionately. And my mother was an RN. She was a float pool nurse and a charge nurse, and she just knew everything about the whole hospital. She could be on any floor on any day. And I would sometimes after school go visit where she was, and things were different back then. But I would sometimes hang out with my mom at the hospital she worked at, and it seemed like a really lovely, appreciated job. And I was a Filipino child being, kind of nudged into that career. But the more I explored it, I actually started off in nursing school and was excelling nicely, and I just simultaneously had a lot of gut feelings about that not being something I wanted. And I was also a registered nurse assistant and working at an adult family home. And I was like, it feels really good to be in this role, but it seems like something I would not want to do for the long term. It would be something that I know I'd have like an early career change. So I career changed at that time. I was also a part of a community group theater whose mission was to actively have dialogues about racism in America. And all of the work was very provoking, and it created a young little activist in me. And it was very great to be in a community at that age. And basically what I found I wanted to do was something pretty purposeful in that direction. And so I started to study theater and psychology, and went to Rutgers University and majored in both. And I wanted to do drama therapy because I found that, people who have access to their emotions and can express themselves and speak to the things that are most challenging in their world, whether it be like communicating with their parents, their teachers. I had this idea of like how I wanted to engage with young people, and I wanted to work with middle school aged kids. And I did. And I was working a lot with, so that was like a simultaneous path that I had while stumbling upon a soul sister who was also a home birth midwife. And, she asked me, you still have your nurse's assistant credential. Well, why don't you come assist me in the home birth setting? And I was like, whoa, She said, don't you worry. I know everything I need to know. I just need you to chart a couple things and just be your loving, caring self. And I was like, all right. So I think I could do that. And I showed up, and it just swallowed me.
But what about it when she first said it gave you pause? Like, what did you know about home birth before then to make you go, I'm not sure if I'd want to do that?
I guess there was this aspect of like considering, well, first of all, I supported my nephew's birth when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
My sister was a teen mom, and I shared a bedroom with her, and she wasn't with the guy who impregnated her. And basically, I was her doula with a midwife group at a hospital that my mom works at. And, basically, it was a very beautiful experience. And by the way, I was so intrigued about that placenta. I put the gloves on. I was examining the placenta. I was like, I can't believe this organ. Yes. That was the little seed that I had no idea was just germinating all that time, because when I then was offered to do this, I was actually excited, but it was the gravity of just knowing that, wow, that's a lot of responsibility. And to assist you in something that's so important and powerful, like I want to be able to do that well. And I don't know what I'm doing right now. It's just that kind of, level of, it wasn't that I feared home birth. It was more just knowing how important that role is. And then she really comforted me with, you can learn the more important stuff later. For now, just show up. And that's what I did. And it was very, very, very beautiful. And it was just that, we know because we've supported a lot of birth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when someone's just like in their element and not being disturbed, or, there was just long ends of time where she would just check the baby and then just leave us and, let the mom do whatever she was doing. And she'd do something real simple, like touch on her back in a certain way. And I would just like reach over and touch on her back in the same way she was touching her own. And she would just like nod. And I was like, oh, this is really like, this is easy. You just really just see what's needed and see how you can
being
support.
Present.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. So through that is what then brought you into doula work.
Mm-hmm. I tried to keep my simultaneous career path, which I was doing actively, and I ended up getting my degree in theater and psychology. And it was the year that I was in London studying at Shakespeare's Globe and also teaching some elementary age kids theater-related stuff, Shakespeare actually. But it was during that time when a friend of mine, a couple midwives, were simultaneously in Uganda opening a birth center there with what's now known as Mother Health International. But at the time it was a different name. But nonetheless, I was, just across the water, not the water, but the Mediterranean Sea. Anyway, it was simultaneous. And they asked me to come join them in their efforts when I was done. And so when that summer arrived, I went down to Uganda, and I was working alongside some traditional birth attendants and, midwives, and just kind of being at the foot of more birth, being at the feet of just natural, beautiful birth. And so when I returned to New York at that point, even though I finished my other degree, I just knew that birth was my calling and I had to listen to it. And pretty immediately, I started supporting as a birth doula. And then got several births under my belt before I was like, oh, let me get trained and certified with DONA. But yeah, so that's the kind of order it went for me.
Oh, that's fascinating. So when you were in Uganda and just seeing the births that were happening there, and it also sounds like too that in the birth that you did assist with your friend, that it was very much similar in the sense that you were just observing, and it was everyone there was just like hands off and letting women just do what they needed to do in that process.
Yes. And the site was a beautiful site that had this community space in the center. And you think of it like a flower petal, like a flower,
yes.
I mean, and like with petals all around. And the birth rooms were like the petals. And then there was this big dome in the center where people would labor together. And there was hammocks and candles because, sometimes the generator wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So it was just like, whatever you were doing. I mean, I remember seeing someone during every surge, and surge is another word we use for contraction sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But during every surge, she would do this running motion, just running. And then she would finish and calm down and it's just so unique the way that people were just free to explore how they labor. And I remember breech deliveries
yes.
and twin deliveries and I just remember that aspect of just hands-on care and us learning how to be really hands-on in terms of just touching and connecting with the birthing person, the baby inside, and just having that element of understanding physically what's going on and being creative in terms of if there's positional stuff that we can help facilitate to have a better passageway. And so later on, when I actually started to study spinning babies, I was like, oh, I kind of know this stuff. I didn't know what I knew because a lot of it was on intuition of what I had gained through time. But then I started to understand why my instinct was to have someone, put their leg up on a chair, or why my instinct was to put their butt in the air. It was just understanding the anatomy of the pelvis and all of the ligaments and all of those details around that zone that just are exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing foundation to get before becoming a doula, because as being a doula in the city, getting those first couple of births can be pretty challenging if you don't have a connection in some way, but also to experience seeing birth in that setting versus going into our hospitals and what we see in the hospitals. How much of that did you bring into your work in the hospitals?
You're right. I totally feel blessed that was my foundation. And I remember another doula friend of mine when we were both hitting our 100th birth around that time. And we were talking about a birth. And we were just in story mode of a certain birth. And she was like, I wonder if she needed a little Pitocin. And I was like, well, I was just thinking she needed to do some lunging, and so it was just the instincts of what your brain thinks of first when your foundation is in other places. And she's a lovely doula. I love her. She's wonderful. And it's just this element of I felt very privileged to have seen a lot of things that worked physically without having to go towards these other wonderful methods of intervention when they're helpful, but just having a more creative foundation of really exploring how can we keep this less disturbed.
Yes. And I feel that, I would love for all birth doulas to get their foundation in home births. We don't have that many home births that they get to attend, with having that experience first and then coming in, because there was definitely a lot I learned from home births more than I learned from hospitals, and just integrating that even before going to the hospital, just at home, to be able to be contraction spaced out. So what is that telling me now, as opposed to the first in the hospital, contraction space out, let's go to Pitocin. We know that home births, but then our uterus is telling us something. We need to eat. We need to rest. We need to do something different. We get to see that more, as opposed to in the hospital where we're they're going to come in and do this next thing. So these are your options. But yeah. That sounds really great and fascinating that you had that experience and were able to bring that to your work here, which, you know, for the most part in doula work and having seen those two vastly different experiences and then bringing that in, like, what is your favorite thing about being a doula? What is your favorite part?
Wow.
It's hard to pick just one.
Yeah.
I know. Okay.
I will say, okay.
Or three. Or three favorite things.
Okay. The first thing that I can think about, which really excites me when I think about it, is witnessing parents become parents.
Yeah.
And yes, they're already parenting in the womb, and they're, you know, talking to their baby and doing things that are really establishing that connection. And it's really a beautiful thing. And that's something I often encourage, is just like establish that connection. And sometimes you see people really being tested on their parenting, even in the womb, of just like, this decision that we're making of switching providers, and this decision that we're making of moving homes, and this decision that we're making about, you know, because our baby is in breech position, like what we should do next, if we should do anything, or what kind of things to try. And you can just bear witness to this like blossoming process. And then the moments that the baby comes out and is on their belly, and just that really spectacular moment of birth and birthing of fatherhood, birthing of motherhood, or whatever they identify with. And, you know, this baby, you know, just unifying this, you know, this energy around a family that's just so glorious. And I remember, you know, just you know, having many moments of tearful moments, or just like, oh, look at them, and let me just snap this picture real quick. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. And I agree. It's those moments that they don't realize that the choices and the decisions that they're making prior to our parenting decisions, right? It's hard for a lot of them to make that connection to, yes, because the baby, right? These are why we're also parenting. They often think, oh, as soon as the baby is born, that's when parenting begins. But it's not. It's in those moments where they make those decisions and where they feel supported in making those decisions, like also with the doula, right? Just supporting that helps them to be aware, like you're saying, take that moment. Because a lot of times we know that in those moments, they're like, okay, the nurse is like, I need to do, and everyone else's hands, and we're there to kind of be like, let this be uninterrupted, this moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is such our role at different times in the work, is just, how do we really preserve what wants to happen right now?
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, I've just thought about, you know, this makes me think about how there's been instances where I'm sure you've experienced too, where it's like, okay, they're breastfeeding, they have this family unit thing going on. I'm going to stand outside the door, or just kind of like in this area that's just going to keep people from walking in right now, because they want, or, you know, they didn't say it necessarily, but they deserve some private family time that's going to be uninterrupted right now. So how can we facilitate that?
Yeah, that is a special moment. Yeah. And I agree. Just taking those times, or answering the questions when the nurse asks or someone else asks for them, that we can answer for them. Right. So that's such a great moment.
Yeah. Oh, but I wanted to say about that foundation thing, a foundation in more undisturbed versions of birth, like, you know, having a home birth foundation would just be awesome.
Yes.
And like in some of the mentorships that I've engaged with, there's been, you know, instances where I've witnessed their first birth. And sometimes it's, you know, just from listening, and sometimes it's actually being together. And then I think about those, I think about the way they talk about it afterwards. And like when it is, say, you know, a birth in a hospital with a midwife who was very supportive, and maybe we had to advocate for a couple things to keep it natural, and it was natural. And she's like, wow, I didn't know birth could be that beautiful. And, wow. And then, someone else who might be like, oh, maybe it was someone who had an epidural and, things slowed down, so they needed other things. And maybe the personality of the nurse was a little more harsh, and, and that doula's processing afterwards, like, wow, Myla, I didn't know that, it would be that, hard. And,
yes.
We would have to do that much advocacy. And, I didn't know how much energy we'd have to be like, juggling when it comes to navigating the hospital environment. And I'm like, yeah, it's vastly different. And mind you, birth is beautiful in all settings. It's just this element of like what we're exposed to. And I really think that there's, something really, I really think that there's something very divine about the kind of birth experiences people are choosing to have and creating for themselves and their babies, even if it was, an unplanned cesarean, whatever it is, there's something really purposeful about what their family may need or benefit from in their initial foundations. And same thing for doulas. I feel like there's something really important about the way that they've been exposed that's going to help shape and inform the way that they blossom into the birth field.
Yes, I think that's so true. All of those aspects, and especially, when I started, I remember I contacted DONA for a mentor, and they had like one in the entire country. And I was like, one mentor?
One person of color mentor, or one whole
freaking mentor?
Yikes.
And I was like, okay, so how are you supposed to do this, right? Because you take the training and then you're just like, well, how do you figure this out? And luckily I went into a doula partnership and then found community. And like you said, mentoring is extremely important. And I'm glad that it's something that's more readily available now than when I first started, because I think we underestimate the ways, especially in this work, we're not thinking about mentorship. We're just thinking about doing the work and helping people, but also we need to process as doulas as well. And,
yes.
telling those stories. I love telling those stories because you're not only telling a story, but you're also realizing what you need to help get you through that moment, or someone else can help you process it in a way that you never thought about. So mentorship is really, really important. And I encourage every doula to find a mentor where they can, because I mean, it's like you said, helping them to reframe it and think about it in a way that can bring them a different understanding. But it is a lot of work. It is a lot.
Oh, yes. We know. We've been mentoring people for years and together. It's just awesome to think about the blessing that they have in having community around them, as well as a mentor. And so, like, even if people can't find a mentor on a certain, year for whatever reason, just connecting with other birth workers, just so that they could have that moment of processing and having the opportunity to care for themselves in the work, because we all know this work can be very, very, very taxing.
Physically taxing, emotionally, mentally, and the things that we witness and see and not having it in context. Like, I remember the first time I saw fundal pressure for delivery, I was shocked to see that someone could press on a woman's belly that hard with their entire body while she's delivering. I needed a moment afterwards. Like, I remember on the way home, just sitting and just thinking about what I saw and the mother, it's not explained to her in that moment. They just do it. And then when she cried out, they were like, oh, this is what we have to do. But it was like, there was no consent prior to for her to understand. Now, all of a sudden, she just has someone's full body weight on her belly while she's pushing. So that, just to understand like how I could help someone the next time around before that moment of educating them if that's a potential thing that could happen. Because I thought that for me, I know after when I spoke with the client, I let her explain her story to me and what she felt and everything. Exactly. And her experience. And it was extremely traumatic for her to not have had that conversation about that. So yeah, the next time around, I was just definitely more informed in a way and educated people in a way that wasn't scary. I think that, to know a little bit before but luckily I hadn't seen it after that time for a really long time. But yeah.
I want to also just point out the contrast of a fundal pressure experience that I witnessed at home. And the midwives basically, during pushing stage had that moment and they were like, okay, this is going to change a bit. And she asked the other midwife, she said, I want you to sit right there. You remember? And she was like, okay. So, and they basically talked her through a moment and it was a momentary need for consent. And the birthing person was like, okay. And you could see in her eyes, she was like, game, let's do this, right?
We're in this together.
Yes. And then it began and it was powerful. It's a physiological, oh shit, excuse me, I'm 5%. Let me go. I better get my thingy, my charger. But what I was going to say is, it was very intense, like we know fundal pressure to be, but this mom was totally on board. And, the birth was like moments after. And when I checked in with her about that experience, she was like, yeah, it got really intense there. But, she like her experience of it was positive. And she was like, it was so great to know that they knew what they were doing and everything was great. So I was like, I had to do more processing after the birth than she did. Because she was feeling A-okay.
Yeah. So among your many passions of being a doula and all of the things you do with your childbirth education, your lactation counseling, you are also in the process of helping to open a birthing center called the Birthing Place in the Bronx. Tell us about that.
I'm just very excited about being in a position where we have the opportunity to do this right now. When I returned from Uganda, I remember looking at how can a birthing center exist in New York?
Yes.
And upon research, I was like, oh my gosh, there's just too many obstacles. And this whole concept of having to be under the thumb of an MD in order to support the natural birthing process feels, unfortunate. And it's just too big of a mountain to climb. So I let it be. But I always knew the beauty of birth centers. And I had supported births at birth centers in my home state in Seattle. I supported births in birth centers in Seattle, and I had just loved what birth centers can offer. It's a nice in-between experience of what a hospital can be and what a home can be. It's a home-like environment that seeks to allow people the same liberties that they would in a home setting without having to be in their home. But a birthing center, some may know and some may not, but it's a nice in-between option available when someone doesn't necessarily want to birth in the hospital and doesn't necessarily want to birth at home, but it offers the same liberties that one would have in the home setting in terms of freedom of movement, your baby being checked on through via a Doppler, so they could still keep all the normal assessments of how you're doing clinically and how your baby is doing. And, for blood pressure to, baby's heart tones and, temperature, anything that is being recorded, but in a setting that's just similar to home, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Allowing them to eat and drink more, to get into the tub, into showers, almost all of the same things that you would have in your home to help you. Instead of having a birth tub at home, you're in a birthing center that has a tub available, and they allow you to eat and drink the entire time as long as you feel up to eating and drinking. Yes.
And you can have the support people that you want to have. And, that's also a unique thing, is who people choose to have with them at their birth. And then it doesn't have to be limited to one or two individuals. Maybe they have 3 of their closest sister friends, or maybe they are considering, having their grandfather, the grandfather of the baby, present. And, that there's like a family space for a family member who's not in the birthing room, where they can be until, the birth happens. And I really love a birth center story where, the birthing person, she said her dad could come in, and he was like, oh no, that we don't really do that, when he was invited. And then it was like, okay, we respect that, cool. And then he slips in a little later during pushing stage, and he just sits in a chair and looks out the window the entire time while pushing remains to happen for a while longer. And then, when the baby emerges, he's just still looking out the window and just weeping. Oh. And that beauty of having that unique experience where this grandfather can connect with that grandbaby
in that moment,
in that way, that it's really just the imprint of relationships that happen through the time of birth is really powerful. And, I feel that's with my nephew too. I was there when I was
24.
Yeah. And just that level. And I'm close with all my nieces and nephews, but there's something special about just that memory of being there. There's something, So the point that I'm making is that you can choose the people who you want to have with you. And that's some of what makes a birth center special. And thankfully, we're in communication with North Central Bronx Hospital, and we love the midwives there. As many in the birth field may know, they've been such a welcoming location when it comes to home birth transfers. They don't you don't walk in with this feeling of defense, oh, we made this bad choice of home birth, and now here we are for your help. Sorry for that decision, and please don't treat us badly. Yeah. It's not like that at all.
Okay.
It's come in, we've been waiting for you. Your midwife called us. We have a bed ready. And they're just so welcoming and awesome. And so it's great to be in communication with them about an official transfer relationship. And the actual building is freaking amazing. Okay, I'm going to chill out. Okay. But the actual building is great. It's actually in Riverdale. So that's the northeast section of the Bronx. And in a neighborhood that is more wealthy or affluent than other parts of the Bronx. And some people in either neighborhood might see some distinguishing I want to say an imaginary line, but it's this basically a distinguishing line of okay, this is Riverdale and this is the Bronx, and it's not the same. But a lot of Riverdale folks I know consider themselves part of the Bronx, and a lot of Riverdale folks I know consider them Riverdale. The point is, there's a history behind that too, which I won't get into the depth of, but ultimately what we want in being a community of birth workers, of women of color and people of color, we're very excited to serve the Bronx community, and our midwives speak Spanish and Cantonese and Mandarin and Arabic and of course English. And we're basically right now, our crew is focusing on how we can maintain our primary focus of being a center that centers Black and brown people because of the disparities that we're so well aware of when it comes to particularly Black people birthing in New York. You hear the statistics of like 4 times more, and that's statistics throughout the United States. But in New York, our Black people are way more at risk than the rest of the state, the United States. So the point is, Bronx, we aim to make sure that the Bronx has access to quality midwifery care. And one of the things we're working into our budget is mobile care. And so we've conceptualized this van with 2 exam rooms being in like the South Bronx on one day and another part of the Bronx on a different day, and that they stay consistent in these locations on a weekly basis so that we can make sure that people are seen closer to their home and come to the birth center, the birthing place, for education if they wish to take our classes there, and of course for the actual birth. Thankfully, the center is right off of a bus line and a train line, so it's only a few minute walk away, like eight or so minutes of a walk away. It's right next to a park, and it's going to be a few floors with a rooftop garden, and made with all green materials. And I shouldn't say with all green materials. Basically, we're working with My Life, My Planet, which they specialize in utilizing. They specialize in creating spaces that are
eco-friendly.
Right. Yes, there you go.
Yeah,
yeah. There you go.
That's great that they're part of that project too. In an outdoor space, it's amazing. In a building, especially if you're going to have a birthing center, that can be very helpful. So they'll have midwives at the birthing center, and where they're going to be seen for their care, even well woman care prior to getting pregnant, and then well woman care after. And there'll be doulas on staff, or the people will find their own doulas. Like what other services besides the midwifery and the education will be provided?
So the birthing place is a center for health, wellness, and family. So one of the things that is a big discussion with a main partner midwife, Nubia Earth Martin, you may know of her work, Birth from the Earth. We were talking about how when we begin to transition out of the state that we're currently in, that there may be a requirement for healing, right? And getting together in healthy space for what might be some pre-existing trauma of what has happened during this window of time of like less connect. In COVID times, people also had to birth by themselves in some instances, and or with just their partner, and their doula was virtually there, and just like those different pieces of what they had to manage, and to be able to get together in community space centered around the idea of healing and connecting again. So that's definitely a transition that's going to be a part of the mix. But we're going to offer education with classes that range from childbirth education to birthing at the birth center. But our childbirth education is also going to be geared towards people who want to birth in the hospital setting. It's going to be a range of classes that include, feeding your baby, caring for your newborn, and even I have someone developing a really great curriculum right now about fertility. And when I hear about that curriculum, I get so excited because
that's wonderful.
It's so in depth, like mind, body, and spirit of preparing for your fertility journey. And So a range of education classes, and then a wellness center, which we will have specialty providers, acupuncturists, chiropractors, massage therapists who are very specialized in the pregnancy arena. Yeah. And so that's really important to us as well, so that we can create this holistic care where people can have access to related services that they may need in one setting. And mental health counseling is another one that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to with our clients. And we believe that there's ultimately this whole experience. I think a problem with what is wrong with our medical system today is everything is so compartmentalized.
Yes.
And there are profits around when something's wrong. That's when you can charge for something, as opposed to the preventative care that can occur when you just give space to connect and socially support each other as parents. When, maybe a facilitator is there, not even really teaching anything, but giving the parents an opportunity to be and exist in their space. And that's something that supports this mental health aspect of preparing for pregnancy. And also after you've had a baby, just being able to connect with others. And so we really want to care for the whole experience. And of course, with birth, we're going to have a group of midwives, and birth assistants, and people can hire their own doulas, or they can go off of our referrals. We definitely feel really connected with our community, thankfully, and we'll be able to direct people if they're seeking. But as of now, we don't have a doula program particularly defined because there's so many other pieces to juggle when it comes to moving this work forward right now.
So speaking of those pieces that we need to juggle to move this work forward, how can we support this birthing center? What can we do? What actionable steps are available for us?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah. Well, right now, one of the things, and I plan to make a post on it on IG. I'm at Birthing Place BX is our handle, and I was planning on making a post about getting more people engaged with their legislators during this session of just basically informing of the need for more birth centers. And I'm going to create hopefully a script that they can utilize and adapt. But I think basically getting your senators to be on board with the birth center bill. I'll give you the numbers to that bill afterwards. Wonderful. In case. Yeah. And even if it doesn't happen this time around, they'll be hearing lots about this between now and next year. I know our government has to manage a lot of things right now with the pandemic and police brutality. And, there's a lot of focuses right now. And, one of the focuses I would like to, stay in the mix is the birthing options. Maternal health is also a part of this big picture.
It is because currently there are only 2 birthing centers in New York, and one just recently opened. There's the Brooklyn Birthing Center, and then there is the Jazz Birthing Center that's opened up in Manhattan on 5th Avenue. So there are no options currently to have one in the Bronx. So having one in the Bronx would be ideal. So we can support by contacting our legislatures and asking them for this option. How else can we support? Is there a GoFundMe we can donate to?
Yeah, actually, we're going to start our crowdfunding campaign very soon in the next couple weeks. And right now we do have a PayPal Me account where we have a great architect. We have a great architect on board, and we've agreed to what general contractor we'll be working with and designers. Everything is like ready, but we do need funding for the renovation. And so that's what we're going to create a GoFundMe for. I want to highlight three of the organizations that we're working with.
Okay.
And that's what I pulled up earlier. Our three partnering organizations are Birth from the Earth, her personally, but Nubia Martin is a wonderful midwife, and she was with me when this first sprouted. She's a partner and, has been related to everything going on. And basically, she does a lot when it comes to creating access to home birth. And, eventually we'll be working on helping people get access to birthing center births, depending on how swift we move in getting as many insurances on board with what we're up to. Wonderful. And so another one is Save a Rose Foundation. Bruce McIntyre, who unfortunately lost his partner Amber due to unfortunate events at a hospital in the Bronx, and basically has been really empowered, I'd say, to help make he has shifted into a really active role in improving birth in New York. And one of the things that he's truly excited about is this birth center, and that he's on different platforms that can lift the ability to create this for the Bronx. And
that's great.
Yeah. So supporting Save a Rose Foundation is supporting us. Same with Birth from the Earth. And then finally, My Life, My Planet. They basically work on any projects that have to do with improving the planet. And they said, wow, this is definitely improving the planet because you may know the saying, peace on earth begins with birth.
Birth, yes.
Yeah. And so they know all about green design. And so this is the organization that we're going to do our kickoff fundraising when it comes to specifically the renovation. And so that will be happening in the next couple weeks. And hopefully people will be sharing and giving. And one thing I'm particularly seeking right now is hopefully we can find a couple or a few very wealthy contributors who wouldn't mind being matchers. If you know what a matcher is, it's basically someone who matches what the community gives. And so sometimes that really encourages and inspires and activates more community members to give and share in larger amounts because they know someone else is back there matching their contributions. So we hope to find a couple matchers in case that becomes available. But yeah, so we just want you guys to stay in touch, follow us. There's
1 second pause. Yeah. I can wait for it to pass. And because New York is so empty,
so
you hear it loudly. Yeah, for the longest time. Okay. Yeah. You could say that part again. You were talking about.
Yeah, we just want people to stay in touch with the process, to help amplify the work, and share with your friends, share with your leaders. Really, when it comes down to it, we love the thought of us bringing forth this birth center. We can seek for investments in other places and support from our government. And we'll also do that. But just like the idea of our New Yorkers saying, we want this and we can help create this to happen. So if you can energize it in any way, we appreciate it.
Definitely. So at the time of releasing this should be a few weeks, and we'll have the information for the GoFundMe and how people can support. And we'll also include all of the links to where people can support the other organizations that are supporting you as well. That's really, really important. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now we go on to my segment that I like to call Daily Inspiration. I love a quote, and I always daily post one or read one to help keep me inspired. But before we start with that, the first question is definitely, what's your favorite scent?
There's so many good ones. I'm going to go with lavender. I know a lot of people like lavender. Yet what I love about mentioning lavender right now is there's so many kinds of lavender, right? Yes. There's just different experiences of lavender, but it's definitely one of my go-tos.
Okay, perfect. And then what's a book, film, show, or podcast that's inspiring you right now?
Well, I'll say the book that I've most been touching right now is, it's kind of obvious, but the book that I've mostly been reading right now is Freestanding Birth Centers. It's basically a study on so many birth centers with a lot combined about birth centers throughout the United States as well as internationally. And so just trying to gain as much inspiration as I can from, the American Association of Birth Centers and what they're offering and their resources and connections and classes, but also this book, anything that can fill me about making a better birth center.
Okay, wonderful. Is there a quote that inspires you or that you think of daily that you'd like to share?
I mentioned it already. That's how much I think about it. But yes, peace on earth begins with birth.
That is so true. That is definitely. I remember the first time I saw that quote is shortly after I became a doula, and there was it was an image of the birth. It was the earth, and then there goes a globe and someone holding a baby right in front of it. Do you have it?
Oh no, I was just gonna go for my T-shirt in case it was right here. But I feel you. And, when we just think about that concept and break it down a bit, this concept of just imagining this family being supported during so sacred, and this little being being brought into the world at a time where their family is supported, and those different imprints that are in each of those individuals. I do believe, we're creating peace on earth by having citizens who are sprouting from this foundation of love and support. I think on a mass scale, it makes a big difference. And I think it's important that we all prioritize how birthing people are supported and treated, and how birth can be for families by creating more birth options for them.
That is, I agree. We definitely need more birth options. So that is the one thing that I often say. It's about choice. And we need to make sure that we have those choices available for however people want to choose.
Exactly.
No judgment around the births that you choose or where you give birth, but you should have the choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being a part of my podcast today. But let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Annette. It's such a pleasure. It's so lovely connecting with you anytime that happens. On Instagram and Twitter, it's Birthing Place BX. And on Facebook, it's Riverdale Birthing Place. And the website is thebirthingplace.co. And that is still under construction right now, but it has a nice landing page where you can sign up for a newsletter and stay connected. In our IG page, there's a link tree which has a lot of different things you can do, ways you can support even just like our work here in New York, as well as as well as across the nation. Did you know there are over 350 birth centers across the nation, and only 9 of them are owned and led by people of color?
I did not know that. That is fascinating. I didn't realize there were that many, 350.
Yeah.
Wow.
Plus.
And there's 9. Only 9 led by people of color.
So the Birth Center Equity Fund is working to change that, basically. And so by supporting the Birth Center Equity Fund, you're basically supporting, they have the list of the established birth centers, as well as a list of any birth center that's developing, that's owned and led, or led by women of color, people of color. And they're a great organization, led by Leslie Welch, who is just like a force. She's an MPH who, like, when you hear her speak, there's so much like love and power and intelligence, and you get very inspired by the work. And when you think of the undertaking of really helping to generate more birthing centers owned and led by people of color, like how powerful that is. Definitely. Just the thought of the kind of care we receive sometimes, that we feel like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this provider reflected me just a bit more, even if we're not the exact same culture, just that feeling of like maybe looking like my cousin or something, you know?
Exactly.
That makes a difference for how people are cared for, how their perception of the experience is. And so just to avoid getting into all that, I'm sure you get the idea, but she's up to that. And on our IG page, on our link tree, that is, there's several action steps that can happen, including how to engage with your senators on these matters and passing the bill we talked about. There's just different resources that you can follow.
We'll definitely include all of those in the show notes too. So the last segment that I'd like to talk about is birth stories.
Okay.
And if you would be willing to share your birth.
My birth.
Yes.
Yes. It's funny because I had one of those memories that have existed since the beginning of time. It's more of a spiritual memory, but I do have this recollection before I could even speak of coming here.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, that's just a sidebar. But like in terms of my actual birth, my mother, her water broke. It was just a high leak. She was trickling and she was like, oh, maybe that's just, some discharge. And so she let it be. And then she noticed that it would keep happening. And she was like, I think I might have a high leak. I don't know. Let me just stay home because this is my 4th baby. And I'm not trying to go too early. And so she just waited way long. And after 24 hours hit, she was like, okay, I should probably go to the hospital. And so she went to the hospital and was having contractions. And I'm not sure much detail about whether she received Pitocin or what happened exactly. But eventually I was born vaginally. And I had to stay in the NICU for some reason. And she told me about how hard it was after the birth, just having that element of not being able to be as affectionate as she would like, to hold me and just seeing me in a little case. And just that idea of just not being the way she wanted. Wow. And I remember her processing that with me a bit. But, we're so affectionate, me and my mom. It's like, I don't know if that came out of the fact out of that, or I just have this really affectionate foundation. So I definitely think she made up for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know you were the 4th child. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that story with me, and also for being on my podcast today. I really appreciate it. I love talking with you and hearing. I'm really excited for this birthing center and hoping we get some more momentum and get more people involved as much as we possibly can. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, Annette, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I appreciate how much you're willing to elevate and amplify this work. So, thank you.
Besos too. Thank you so much. Gracias. Thanks for listening to the Clearbirth Podcast. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. You can find me on Instagram at the Clearbirth Podcast. If you want to send me an email, you can reach me at theclearbirthpodcast@gmail.com. Adios, hasta luego, goodbye, until next time.